doing. Also, if you think of a question, ask me. If we don't know it, I'll turn it over to one of the other men, and they'll probably know the answer. All right, we're continuing. Tonight is the last lesson on Bible and science, or, God's creation. And examples of God's handiwork is almost endless. You can look anywhere on earth and see examples of God's handiwork. I've only went through and picked out a very few, even in bacteria and the algae. I found so much. I could have written 5 or 10 pages just on each and every one of those. So I really condensed it down. In condensing it, I put a disclaimer in this one. In condensing, I may have copied something wrong, I may have gotten a number wrong, or I may have summed it up wrong, but at least you'll get the general idea. Under simple forms of life, algae is the first one, but everybody seemed to focus on one particular type of algae, and that's the algae called Volox, whatever that is. It is a single-celled creature. It is one cell. It has no brains. It has no nerves, and yet it manages to swim. In fact, the Volox is called the synchronized swimming because all of the individual cells synchronize in doing a certain type of swimming, and yet they have no brain. In fact, you may recognize algae. You may have it on one of your ponds down there. Do you ever get green scum on your pond? Yeah, that's algae. More than likely it's Volox, probably. It's something nobody really likes to have, and yet it plays a very vital role. But even with no brain and no nerves, it still manages to function. It communicates with other algae and carries on a tremendous work. Bacteria, and I'm going to go through some of these quickly. I did find a picture, and as long as I give credit where I got it, we should be okay copyrighted. I made sure I did give the guy credit. Bacteria is a single cell. How many of you have ever had a bacterial infection? Most of us, okay? If you had a bacterial infection, it is totally different than a viral infection. A viral infection is not affected by antibiotics. Have you heard of antibiotic-resistant bacteria or germs? Many people, and I've got several friends that are doctors, people come in and say, "Oh, I think I've got the flu. I want an antibiotic." Are you a nurse? I thought so. It just, you knew what I was talking about. And, we have several nurses and nurse practitioners in church. So you knew what I was talking about. So I thought, okay, this is not your typical factory worker. But people go into the doctor's office and say, "Oh, I've got the flu. I need an antibiotic." You're wasting your money. It does absolutely no good on a viral infection. It does help with a bacterial infection. Bacteria, and I mean, there's a big, long article just on number 2, the sentence. There's a big, long article. So I summed it up. It's so advanced that it builds borders within itself to prevent harmful things from getting inside and corrupting it. Now, this is where we're going to spend. I just put that in so you could get an idea. Even from a single cell of algae or a single cell of bacteria, it is so advanced that it defies, human comprehension. Now, number 2 and 3 is where we're going to spend a lot of our time, in fact, most of our time. Uh, in the book of Job, many, many references. I didn't write them all out, but in the book of Job, Job describes throughout the book many of God's creations and how marvelous they are. Job talks about fish and how complicated and how thoroughly perfectly designed they are. He talks about birds and how they fly and how all these other things. He talks about animals in general. Job talks about dinosaurs. Even though they've been extinct for 5 billion years, they were still alive in Job's day. Job saw them, knew exactly what they were. He described the rain cycle, how it rains. The rain goes into the creeks go into the rivers go into the ocean. It is re-evaporated, transported by clouds back over the air, and it continues the cycle. Job describes that. Even the rain is designed to completely make a cycle so that the earth is watered, and yet we don't run out of water. So Job described a lot of these things before microscopes and telescopes. Think about the bees, and again, this is one of those where, I probably 20 or 30 long articles that I tried to sum up as much as I could. Very interesting. I would like to go into details. But, birds pick up, I just lost my word. Nectar. Birds pick up nectar out of the flowers. Isn't it nectar? Yeah, you're outvoted. The flower is designed to have nectar in it. The flower is so designed, and depending on what kind of a bee or bird, the bee or some birds, but bees, they know exactly which flower they can get nectar from. They know how to get into that flower. The flower is closed to many animals, but it lets in the bee. And it talks about in great detail how that the bees take the nectar and take it back. And it takes like several thousand trips to make a pound of honey. But they go back and forth. If we put in the birds in there, we would see that, and I forget the name of it because I didn't write it down. There's one particular bird that is made with a long extension to reach down inside, draw the nectar out. How many of you love to play with bees? Yes, sir, Noah? I'm sorry? A hummingbee is one. Yes, that's one type. Bird, yes, I think it is. I think you're right. But they're made so that a flower that will trap a fly will let a bird in and take the nectar. And birds also and bees, take the nectar and implant it in so that corn grows and all the other things. But look at the bees. I like them from a distance. I'm not as bad with birds as I am snakes, but I'm not a big fan of bees. But if you ever look at them up close, behind glass, they're beautifully designed. Beautiful colors. God made them with beautiful colors and made them so that they could take the nectar, take it back, put it in to the combs, come back and get more. And then I mentioned the flowers. And I do have plants. Let's go on and look at the plants. Plants do not have a brain. I mentioned the algae and the bacteria. No one here, so don't you all take it offensive. But I've met some people that reminded me of algae. No brains and no, other stuff. But look at plants. Look at just the rose, for example. Beautiful. And they come in different colors and all kinds of things. And yet it does not have a brain that says, okay, all right, let's see, what do we need to do next? Oh, we need to make a stalk. Okay. How do we make a stalk? Well, I don't know. Maybe let's try it by trial and error. Let's do trial and error and see if we can make a stalk. Because once we get the stalk, then we got to figure out how to make the leaf and the bloom. And so evolution is going through this whole process. How on earth are we going to get a bloom up there to make a rose? They don't think. It just, God designed it. Jesus said that even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed as beautiful as the flowers of the field that God made. They're beautiful. And without a brain or without any help, that little teeny tiny seed dies, produces what eventually grows up to be a stalk, which then grows up and makes limbs, for trees, it makes limbs, it makes leaves, it produces blooms, and then we get the apple, the orange, the peach, or whatever else it is. And it all starts with just a teeny little bitty seed. God designed the plant to transport water from the earth. Evolution figured out how to get the water to go up the stalk and out to the branches and produce the fruit and everything. Well, I've explained my thoughts on that. God designed it within itself without a brain to think. God designed it so that the seed dies, the seed begins to grow, and without a computer, it begins to push water up, and that water comes up. I love watermelon. Y'all have watermelons in your area? Really? Okay. I was going to say, we had a peach tree in our backyard. But that little bitty, teeny, weeny, little bitty seed produces a great big watermelon. How did that seed know what to do to produce a watermelon? Even something that we think of as simple is really complicated. Then there's photosynthesis. And again, there were numerous articles. I tried to sum it down. In fact, Merriam-Webster gave me the easiest, simplest definition I could find. Photosynthesis is the formation of carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and a source of oxygen, such as water, in the chlorophyll containing cells, which what makes the leaves green, and expose the lights. That plant takes in the sunlight through the process of photosynthesis, converts it into carbohydrates, and it releases oxygen that we believe. I don't know what I spelled wrong there. By the way, if you find a mistake, my spell checker went down on my computer. I deliberately changed words, and it didn't, my spell checker is out. Any of you all computer geeks? You look like maybe just a geek? All right. Yeah, what would make my spell checker automatically just go out? You have no idea. I don't either. But anyway, God made plants. They take in the carbon dioxide, convert it to oxygen, and trees, flowers. I was reading not long ago in one of my magazines that, if you have problems with breathing certain things, get plants, put them in your house, and they will produce oxygen, which will help in many, many cases. God designed the plant from a little seed to produce everything from a rose to a watermelon to an acorn, and then it starts the process all over again. I know I've told some of you, when growing up, the house that we lived in, that I grew up in, had an oak tree out front that I could not, this is about as far as I could get my arms, about halfway around it. And during the fall, you had to watch out because it would drop those acorns on you. But if you plant those, that little acorn will grow into another great big acorn tree. How did evolution figure all of that out? God designed it. A watermelon seed produces a watermelon. An apple seed produces an apple. Well, how do you get all the different varieties? Well, we've explained that a couple of weeks ago. Look at man. And again, I just quit typing because I would have been here another 3 weeks. The human heart. Now, the average is somewhere between 60 and 100 beats per minute. The average, I'm told, is around 72. Yeah. I know I have a pacemaker, and they got it set on 72. So, I can't go below that. But, I took 72 as an average because that's what my pacemaker is set for. At 72 beats a minute, that is 4,320 beats an hour. That is 103,680 beats per day. That is 37,843,200 beats a year. And by the age of 72, your heart has beat 2,724,710,400 and never miss a beat. How many cars do you know that you can get 2 billion miles on? Toyota would come close, but you're 81, 80. That's right, we just had your 80th birthday, that's right. So add another 10 years onto that, and your heart has beat 24/7, never takes a break, never rests. It is beat even at 72, it is beat over 2 billion beats. There is nothing man has made that can handle that kind of 24/7, 365, 72 years. There's nothing that can do it. And I broke it down. The heart brings in the dirty blood. I called it dirty because I didn't want to get into the medical stuff. But the heart brings in the dirty blood, sends it over to the lungs out of one side, comes back from the lungs into the other side, and then it's sent through the main arteries into every part of your body. Do you ever think about what that accomplishes? Now, most of you know this. I figured out a simple way to remember it. The blood flows away from the heart in arteries. Now, I figured an easy way, away artery, AA. I finally figured that one out. And then it takes the blood back through veins. The veins take it into one side of the heart. It goes to the lungs, comes back in the other side. Blood only flows one direction. So what keeps the blood in my feet? What keeps the blood in my feet from going down and pooling there? What is it that, every time my heart beat, it pumps it up, but then my heart stops beating for a second. What keeps it from falling back down to my feet? You know that, I'm sure. Now, you don't have to answer, God designed little microscopic gates in your legs, in your feet. When the heart pumps it, it pumps up, the gate opens. When the heart stops, the gate closes, so the blood stays there until the next pump. It pumps it up, the gate closes, and keeps it down. Did I get it close? Pretty good, all right. So, that's how did evolution figure out it was going to need microscopic gates to keep your blood from flowing back down and pump it up, hold it, pump it up, hold it, all the way back to your heart? How did evolution figure that out? Wow, amazing. At 100,000 beats a day, I figured 103,000, but at 100,000 beats per day, your heart pumps over 2,000 gallons of blood every day. Let that soak in. The average adult has about, and again, it depends on size, depends on height, depends on, breadth, and, but the average adult has about 100,000 miles of arteries and veins and capillaries. As the heart goes down, the main artery goes down, branches out, and then as it goes down, that branches out. So by the time it gets down to my big toe, it's a little bitty teeny capillary, but it pumps the blood to the furthermost part of my toe, and then it starts the cycle, sending it back up the veins, back up my legs, back up to my heart, and starts the cycle all over again. 2,000 gallons a day. That's a lot of blood. The average person, as I said, had 100,000 miles, and it takes less than 1 minute to cover that 100,000 miles of arteries, veins, and capillaries. It takes less than a minute to go all the way down and all the way back up, less than 60 seconds. Who on earth designed such a thing? That was a trick question. Nobody on earth designed it. Nobody. Only God could figure out. Now, that 200,000 gallons of blood goes to all the different places. So not every vein is going to get 2,000 gallons. Not every artery, not every capillary is going to get 2,000 gallons of blood. But the heart pumps every drop of that 200,000 gallons of blood. Your heart pumps that much every day, every drop. That's why and I had a blood clot that almost went to the heart. And it's like, they called it the Widowmaker, had they not called it. So they called it, and I'm thinking, man, that thing must be the size of a baseball. It was so tiny you could barely see it with with the microscope. I mean, the blood vessel they called the Widowmaker was so tiny that I don't even have anything to compare it with. They put a filter in to catch any more blood. The filter was only that big, and yet it could catch a bunch of blood clots. That's why when it hits your heart is pumping 100,000, beats a day. It's pumping 2,000 gallons of blood a day. A blood clot the size of a pinhead is enough to throw it off and cause irreparable damage. Think about the lungs. And again, there are pages written on each of these. The lungs takes the blood from the heart, sends it throughout the lung. in that exchange, it takes away the carbon dioxide. It takes away the oxygen and sends the oxygen back to the heart to go to the body. And it takes the carbon dioxide and sends it out when you breathe. You breathe in, you breathe out carbon dioxide to keep your body clean of all of these things. Now, the lungs have to purify that 200,000 gallons of blood a day just so that you can breathe. Wow. What a miracle evolution was. I use a lot of sarcasm. The intestines, and again, it goes into a lot of detail. The average person, and I say average, he wouldn't have that much yet, but the average person has about 15 feet of intestines. The way some of us eat, we must have at least 30 or 40 feet, but I'm not going to name anybody. But in that 15 feet, as you eat, it goes into your stomach, which starts the digestive system. And then as the stomach secretes acid, starts the digestive system, it sends it through the intestinal section. It separates the good stuff from the bad stuff, keeps the good stuff, and there's a lot of other steps involved, but it keeps the good stuff, sends the bad stuff out through excrement, and it keeps our body going. Keeps us in sync, hopefully. Now throw in the other body functions. Did you know that the average, and I use average person, has 22 square feet of skin? The average door, the door, not the frame and everything, the door has an average of 21 square feet. So I have more skin than that door. And we replace that skin almost every day. It reproduces. It hasn't changed my looks any. I keep thinking, I'm getting all this new skin. Why am I so ugly? But think about it, 22 feet of skin. In that skin, there's the outside, there's the inner side, and then there's the innermost scale or skin. A first degree burn is just the outside. Second degree burn goes into the second layer. The third degree goes all the way through. Have you ever had a third degree burn? Have you ever had a third degree burn? Yeah, you have. Anyone else? A third degree burn. When we were up in Ohio, a gas station where I bought most of my gas, I got to know the attendant. This is back when they would come out and wash your window and fill your tank up. Y'all don't remember that. They would fill your tank up, wash your windows, and check your oil. And I got to know this guy quite well. And I went by one day, and the gas station was a blackened rubble. So I checked with some people and found out one of the other workers there, he worked back in the garage, was working on a van, and he had to take the gas tank down to clean the inside of the gas tank. You know what I'm fixing to say. He forgot to drain it. They had a gas water heater in the next room. He's working, the gas is just evaporating. It eventually went over, reached the gas water heater, and blew that place to smithereens. I visited him in the hospital. He had third degree burns over 90-something% of his body. Unrecognizable. Unrecognizable. But our skin is very important. Have you ever had an itch? My wife is making ugly faces because I've got an itch and, I just want to scratch it. Well, who made skin? Something as little as the thyroid can completely throw off your whole body. Had a good friend of mine years ago. This was when we were over in Indiana. He had, and I always wished I had this. He had an overactive thyroid. He could eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and he was as skinny, almost as skinny as you are. His thyroid got out of whack, and he could eat and it would burn it up as fast as he could eat it. And it's like, I can drive by Golden Corral, and I gained 5 pounds just driving by it, But just something as simple as the thyroid can completely mess you up. The eye is more complicated than any camera that man has made. How did evolution figure out to send an image, turn it upside down, send it on back, send it to the brain, and the brain turn it right side up? And how did evolution figure out that I can see color? I like your orange shirt. Very nice. Very nice. Do you know we are one of a few animals that can see color? The eye is so complicated. The ear uses a hammer and an anvil to send waves to your brain, and your brain then interprets those waves as sound. Wow, I just don't know how evolution did it. I just can't figure it out. Think about how many muscles. Now, I read this. I wished I'd thought of it. Picture this is a red hot, burning, red hot burner. And I'm thinking, I forget what it is. I forget, I'm busy. And I lay my hand down. How long does it take me to get my hand off of there? Did you realize that my hand had to sense heat? My fingers had to send the signal up my arm, to my spine, up into my brain, and say, hot. Then my brain had to send the message back down my arm to tell my fingers, move. And it happened faster than... How did evolution figure that out? If that had been me, it's like 1001, 1002, 1003. My hand would have been burnt crisp by the time, my wife will ask me something. It's like, by the time I get the answer back to her, my hand would have been burnt black, period. So even to move a muscle or to pick up a dime, you just pick it up. You know how many muscles are involved in picking up a dime? There are hundreds of muscles involved just to reach over and pick up a penny or a dime. Throw in all the muscles and tendons. Think about, I talk with my arms. If you cut my arms off, I wouldn't be able to say a word. But think how much is involved. I'm not even thinking, and my arms are moving all over the place. How many muscles are involved? How many muscles are involved? When you're baking a cake and do you still do it by hand or by blender? Use a blender? Mixer, okay. Yeah, I didn't think you were the blender type. Do you know how much your brain is having to send down your arm to say left, over, right, over, under, left, over, up, right, under, and you're doing that without thinking because your brain was designed to function so fast that even the supercomputers to do what the brain does probably would not even fit in our sound room. And yet it's compacted into a little bitty spot in your head. I can't help but think what the psalmist wrote. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. One of the firemen was talking Monday night. He said, I don't even know what the subject came up, but he was talking and he said, you've heard there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole. And I said, yeah. I said, but unfortunately, there's no such thing as an atheist. You get it. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. He's not an atheist. He's a fool by Bible definition. When you look at the human body, and like I said, I could spend 3 or 4 more weeks looking at all kinds of things in our creation, and everything points to a divine creator. All right, we'll stop there for the night.